Hey everyone, welcome to our partner webinar series. This webinar is titled How to Revive Your Database and Content to Thrive in the Engagement Economy. My name is Jamie Walker and I'm the Director of Marketing here at Synthio, and I'm really excited to be co-hosting this webinar with Tara from Uberflip. So a couple things before we get started. I want to go over a few housekeeping items. First, I want to let everyone know that this webinar will be recorded and will be sent to everyone about 24 hours after we conclude. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the chat box on the right and we'll answer those during their Q&A session at the end. Also, if you're posting on social, please don't forget to use our hashtag marketing audit. So in case this is your first time joining us, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. While I'm not co-hosting webinars, I enjoy spinning, puzzles, and being outside and active with my kiddos. And I'm not alone here today. Joining me is special guest from Uberflip, Tara. Hey, Tara.
Hey, Jamie. Great to be here today. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. So as Jamie mentioned, I'm the Director of Revenue Marketing at Uberflip. And when I'm not doing webinars or marketing, I usually am outside with my dog, hanging around the city of Toronto, or grabbing some beers with friends. And a little bit about Uberflip in case you're not familiar with us. So Uberflip is a cloud-based platform that empowers B2B marketers to create remarkable content experiences at scale. And essentially, we're marketing to marketers, which is really fun. Jamie and I were just talking about that right before we started the webinar, that we're pretty lucky to have this job. And I'm sure a lot of you B2B marketers in the room can relate.
Yes, definitely. Marketing to marketers is probably one of the most fun things that I get to say that I do. So thanks for that, Tara. So yes, a little bit about Synthio. We are a new kind of customer data platform that helps B2B sales and marketing teams get to the right people faster. We are the largest global contact data provider with over 140 million records, and we help marketers address all of their data cleansing, data appending, and data compliance needs. So we're going to go through the agenda here. Here is a snapshot of what we're going to be talking about today. First, I'm going to walk you through how we here at Synthio tackle our own data and how we get it nice and clean to kick off our year in 2018. I'll show you how to tidy up your database with a contact audit, and then we're going to show you how to use some use case examples of aligning your content with your target audience, and that'll be done by Tara. And she's going to perform a content audit that will help you identify any of the content holes you have in your blog or your resource center. And lastly, we're going to tie it all together with data and content to help you align all of your contact data with your content for the engagement economy. So Tara, can you talk to us a little bit about the engagement economy and what it means for any listeners that may have not heard that term before?
Sure, of course. So for anyone who hasn't heard about the engagement economy, if you attended Marketo Summit last year, this was everywhere, so you might be familiar. But for everyone else who's listening, essentially it's a term that was coined by Marketo to describe the idea that we're living in a digital age defined by interconnection. So everyone and everything is connected, even in the B2B space. The engagement economy really focuses on the fundamental shifts in relationships between buyers and sellers. So what I mean by that is, to provide an engaging experience and build those solid relationships with your prospects, you really have to engage in meaningful ways with all the stakeholders within a company in the ways that they want to be engaged with. So obviously we're not just advertising on billboards anymore, we're engaging with people where they are, whether it's at work, at home, commuting, and really trying to capture that engagement everywhere you can. So in order to digitally transform your company and have these engaging conversations with your audience, you obviously need the right data. First of all, about your audience, but also about your content. And you also need to get that content to the right people at the right time, which is really kind of the promise of marketing automation in the end. So now I'll just hand it over to Jamie to walk through how Synthio approaches their contact audits.
Yes, awesome. Thanks, Tara. So we've all heard the phrase, what we don't know can't hurt us. And that's kind of funny because I think marketers think like this a lot, especially when they think about the health of their database. We all know it's probably not that great. The question always lingers in the back of your mind, but how bad? So it's one of those things that's easy to like put in the back corner, forget about until it becomes super obvious and glaring that maybe the data is not that great. So it's pretty much impossible to ignore. We're fully immersed as marketers in the B2B era of having to rely on the accuracy of our data to A, make educated decisions on how to spend related to revenue. And B, we have to be as relevant as humanly possible to make those engaging relationships and get in front of the people that we're trying to build those relationships with. So for marketers, and I know myself hands down, our audience is really the heart of everything we do. Without an audience, we really don't have much, and we would probably fail. So we need to engage with our customers just as much as we do our prospects. And knowing all the latest changes or even successes that the people we do business with is really important. And all of those different changes, whether it's the company or the person, and those all can be traced back to data. So there's a lot of stats out there about database decay specifically. And we've seen stats as low as 22% per year going bad, and as high in some cases as 33% that I've seen. But if you think about it, that's 2 to 5% a month. That's kind of crazy. So depending on where you get your data sources, it could be from out-of-date data from the moment that you get it, that you enter into your system, or it just, in theory goes bad over time. So I always like to start off this. There's a few phrases that if a marketer, if you're on the sales side, it might be a little bit different, that we've all heard or saw these notes inside our CRM. Like we've all seen the note, wrong phone number. I know that I'm guilty, beyond guilty, for sometimes submitting forms on people's website and writing 99999 as my phone number. Or you've seen the note, the company was acquired, wrong title, or just plain duplicate, which obviously hurts my heart to see. Or the data's old, or the email doesn't work. So if you've seen any of these phrases in your CRM or somewhere within your instance, you're not alone, and please don't feel guilty about it. It just means that it's probably time to adopt some sort of strategy of ongoing maintenance for data cleansing. So that's what we're going to talk about now. So I know I feel a little shy doing this, but I'm going to show you how my marketing team here at Synthio manages our own data hygiene. And don't worry, I'm not going to give away any dirty secrets for anyone in our company who's listening, or will I? Just say, you better listen to the end because I just may. I always get asked the question, how often do you drink your own champagne? And some people say, in other words, how often do you eat your own dog food? But I just can't really fathom my head getting around eating dog food. So I always use the term, how often do you drink your own champagne? So in other words, people ask me, how often do you clean your own data? Now I can say every day because of our integration. But before that, it wasn't always like that. So before we integrated our product specifically with our Marketo instance, we had to do it routinely, and it was done quarterly. And that's when I first started here about 1.5 years ago. But one thing I noticed that even doing it quarterly seemed like it wasn't enough. So we started doing it every 30, 60 to 90 days. And it's amazing how many out-of-date contact level information you have for such a small amount of time, or how many emails we were removing each time we were doing that cleanup, because the email addresses were no longer valid, or as we can imagine, people were moving jobs. One thing I think we often forget is that data or a contact record is a person. People get promoted. We're human beings. We move on to new companies all the time, really. Ambitious, one would say. So following a person is a lot harder than following a company when you think about that information you have on someone, because company information doesn't really change that much, whereas a person's information can change very often. So Synthio, we follow people and not a person's information, as in the company, although we have that too. So now let's jump right into what it looked like when we did this actual data audit. So here's an example on the screen of a data health analysis that we did for ourselves. So just, I changed a few of the actual data because, like I said, I can't air all the laundry. I don't want you guys knowing too much about it. But how we started, first we exported our entire database and ran an append on both contact and company data. So basically what you're seeing here on the screen is this is an analysis that shows 4 mini style of projects that we did to complete our audit. So that first one we looked at is email risk. So what this shows us is the percentage of emails that were at high risk, or one could consider bad emails because people no longer worked at those companies. And these are the emails that we wanted to get out of our database because those were the ones that were affecting deliverability and bounces. So we don't need those in there. So we removed those. The email addresses that were medium, classified as medium, just means that, we all know that there's different higher levels of security clearance out there. So these emails that we have in our database definitely need to be what we call slow rolled into campaigns to see how they react. You kind of need to watch these players to make sure that they're not causing you to have higher bounce rates or whatnot. And then next, what we all want to see is how many low risk emails we have. So this shows us what are the percentages of the highest delivery rates. So for any of our emails that were classified as low risk, we get about an over 98% delivery rate on those. So those are the ones we definitely want to make sure that we keep. So I tell you, this is the portion of the audit where if you're either doing it yourself or you're doing it, your marketing operations person will love this, because that's kind of like their bread and butter when it comes to the data part of it. So the second part, we looked at contact recovery. So these are the outdated, oops, if you want to go back to the slide, I'm just going through those. Yeah. These are the outdated contacts that were identified and corrected using self-reported data. So basically, these are the ones that were considered net new. So I say that because we found these email addresses for the company that the person moved to. So when we think about being able to tell you where you went to your next job, that's obviously huge for our sales team, being able to have that employment history, because that enables our salespeople who are having these relationships to be able to continue to have these relationships with people when they move on to the next company. And the third project is what we call the net new. So we get to see how many additional people or contacts we add. So when you're able to analyze your ideal customer profile in this exercise, you can see how many people fit your total addressable market, which is kind of cool to have a total view of how many people, or if we work in personas, is in your total addressable market that you might not have, that's at your fingertips. And the last thing we looked at was the contact intelligence or enrichment. And that's the kind of a big part for marketers, because here's the information that helps you know as much about your people as possible. So it's about filling in the white space. So here is where we analyze any data points that we can enrich or add to the existing person's record within, for us, it's Marketo, whatever automation system you're using. So the graph on that shows you how much company data you're missing and how much contact level your data you're missing. So as you can see, it's not just cleansing your data once and being done with it. We examine at a very high level how you manage your data and how it's maintained. So then we want to go back one. We're just going to look at the segments, Tara. So yeah, here we go. Thank you. So next we take a look at the data that was returned. So we did this data health analysis. We went through our 4 different segments, and then we're talking about white space. So in other words, we take all that contact intelligence that we got from our assessment, and we were able to enrich our current contact records. So all those, the form fills we got from our website, or we sponsored a lot of events last year. So we've been thinking about coming back and how much information we were putting into our database. So we had very specific levels of information on that person. So we were able to append that information and fill in the white space and really be able to add to the segments that we already had. So once the contact records were updated, we then looked at our segments to see if we could become more targeted and more granular. So adding more technographic information helped us, it obviously makes the segment smaller, but it also, that's the way that you can create a more personalized, engaging sort of email. When you're thinking about marketing to the masses, how can you add in a personalization aspect to that? So I know that most people can probably relate that multiple stakeholders are involved in a B2B decision-making process. And for us, there's generally probably 3 to 4 people. So it's extremely important to consider these players when building out your ICP. So we've already seen so many higher engagement results just from doing this simple audit starting off 2018. So we have deeper contact-focused records, and it's actually been pretty amazing. And then lastly, we can go through the results. So, after what I like to say, we've done our own due diligence on our database. We're able to fill the white space for contact records with all that were incomplete before. We got rid of all the bad stuff. We got that out of our Marketo instance. And now, for us, we had an ongoing plan, but this just helped us kind of fine tune what it would look like. So for anyone who's watching now, this is a good use case example of here are steps you could go through, and this is something you can continue to do and making it ongoing. So earlier I touched on the integration. So there was, like I said, there was a point in time where this wasn't as easy for us, where it was a very manual process, and it, was very specific to the demand gen role here. So now that my team has streamlined an ongoing data management process, because we've integrated our platform with our Marketo instance, and that saves us so much time and energy. So if you yourself are working with a third-party data vendor, just make sure that they have the append function and that you can integrate directly into your platform, because I promise you it will make your life that much easier. And data cleansing really can be automated and always on function. You just have to find the right company to work for to get this done. Because as you know, poor data quality leaves a lot, it can make the best marketing efforts you have going forward just fall short. And then lastly, how can I work for a data company and not talk a little bit about data compliance and GDPR? So we know a lot about GDPR as marketers. We see it all over LinkedIn. We see it everywhere. I don't think we can avoid that beautiful 4-letter term. But one thing I want to point out is that GDPR is a very person-centric not company centric. So it's really based on where people are located versus where that company might be headquartered or where those locations are. So for us, when we were going through our audit, we wanted to see what percentage of our database fell under for Canadian CAFA laws. We know that information, but thinking ahead to GDPR, we need to know how much is going to be affected by what we're currently marketing to, and how can we kind of get ready for that subgroup. And also, when this all takes effect, we have to think about it ourselves as marketers. It's a lot of people go and work on contract assignments in different countries at different places. So, if you're on a short-term assignment, and it's after May 2018, then you might be protected under GDPR laws. So it's important to be able to know that information on the people that you're really trying to get in front of. We don't want any penalties. So being able to know what percentage of your database is compliant is definitely an ongoing thing that I recommend that you keep on your to-do list. All right, I think I've dropped a ton of data knowledge in the last 10 minutes or so, but hold tight. I'm going to turn it over to Tara, and Tara's going to walk us through how she does her content audit in her department.
Great, thanks, Jamie. That last slide is a little bit scary, I'm sure, to some of us. I feel like you're going to get some follow-up questions about that one. Great, so now that hopefully you've got your database in order, or at least you're on the way to getting it in order, how are you going to market to these contacts? So obviously, content is key to a lot of B2B marketing, especially for us here at Uberflip. But why is content so crucial in B2B? I think it really comes back to something that Jamie mentioned with having multiple buyers weighing in. So I know, Jamie, you mentioned you sometimes have 3 to 4 buyers in the room. For us, we found it can be up to 7 to even 10 sometimes. This stat from Gartner says 6.8 buyers. But for software, really, it's kind of a sliding scale. So you really have a lot of people in the room who are making the big decision. Do they want to buy your software or your competitors? Are they even ready to make a decision? And with ABM on the rise, it's kind of throwing a whole other wrench in things. So you really have a lot of angles to consider when it comes to your content, and if you even have the right content to begin with. So like I mentioned, we really need content to sell our products and services, especially in the SaaS space. There's so much competition in B2B content and thought leadership. So how can we get our prospects to engage? Well, according to Marketo, irrelevance is really killing a lot of B2B content kind of dead in its tracks. So if you're sending your entire email database the exact same content every day, it's probably not going to resonate for a good chunk of them, and they're either going to opt out or just assume that your content isn't for them. So you're kind of losing them before you even begin to market to them. So definitely keep in mind that irrelevant content is the #1 reason why you're losing people throughout that buyer journey. So this is just a little bit of background on our buyer personas. So you can see we have Marketing Mary, Demand Jen, who's kind of my role here at Uberflip, Strategic Sam, who would be the VP marketing role. And our team's goal is really to make each of these personas understand why content experience matters to them. So we found that that's one thing that they all have in common, and it's something that we need all of them to buy in on if they're making that purchase decision, like those 7-ish people involved in that decision. So how can we market to all of these 3 different people and possibly even more? Do we need different content for each one? Do we need to organize it differently? Kind of how do we get started with that? So one thing that I definitely recommend starting, especially at the beginning of the year, it's a good time to do something like this, but is to really do a thorough content audit. So there's a couple different ways you can approach this. At the micro level, it's really each content asset itself, looking into what's the content, are you focused on SEO, are you doing any paid, really that content piece. And then at the macro level, you're optimizing really the experience and where your content lives. So here at Uberflip, we try to do both. We help our customers do both. But I would definitely pick one first to start with and kind of check that off your list for the year if you can. So when we started our content audit, we had thousands of content items, as you can imagine. We had infographics, webinars, blog posts, slide shares. But we just kept thinking that we needed more. So we were pumping out more content every day. Probably early last year is when we really pumped the brakes on this and thought we should take a look back, see what we have, and then move forward. So we segmented all of the content we had on our industries that we're targeting, the personas that I just mentioned, what stage of the buyer funnel it was, and which individuals it's targeting. So this is not very glamorous, but I have a screenshot here of, we actually had an Excel doc where we had all of our content items. You could see the content type, so we wanted to make sure that we had different variations, whether it was blog posts, webinar recordings, slide shares, podcasts, the persona it's targeting, the funnel stage, and then far on the right, you can see which nurture campaign we had it in. So we were just mapping out all of our email nurtures in one place. And that's where we started the audit. It didn't end there, but it was kind of a good place for us to start as we were revisiting all of our email marketing last year. So this is kind of similar to Jamie's contact cleanse. You really have to clean up what you have first before you start piling more on, or else you're going to end up in trouble. So with Uberflip, we were actually able to tag all of our existing content. So we tagged it by persona and by funnel stage. So now when we're doing something like sending a campaign follow-up after an event, if we've segmented the list by persona, it's really quick and easy for us to find the content that we should be sending, and we don't have to start from scratch and kind of scramble each time. So definitely map out the content you already have before kind of moving on to the next step. So from there, we actually decided to meet with the customer-facing team. So we knew as a marketing team what personas we wanted to focus on, but we met with our sales team, our customer success team, and product marketing, and we really decided that we just didn't have enough bottom of funnel content. And that's not something that I would have thought. I thought we were kind of covered on all the bases, but after talking to those customer-facing teams, it really helped us identify that number one priority was building out bottom of funnel content. So this is just a quick example of something that came directly from that feedback. So we built out a stream of customer stories, and this was identified as kind of our number one priority after that audit. And you can see this is kind of a mix of videos and quotes, case studies, and it was really, like I said, direct feedback from our customer-facing team that we probably wouldn't have gotten as a marketing team. It's not very often that people reply to your emails and tell you what content they want, versus if you're on a call or meeting in person, they're much more likely to give you an honest opinion. So after you've had a chance to audit the content itself, I would definitely recommend looking at your content experience. So where does your content live? I like to think of this as kind of the house that your content's in, or even the library, the shelf. So you can organize it in tons of different ways. We found that organizing it by industry and persona, even account stage, can be really helpful, because not only does it help your content be discoverable externally, but it helps people like your sales team identify what content to send people after a call. So just kind of surfacing that content internally and externally. So this is a few ways that you can see different marketers organizing their content. So obviously I mentioned personas, funnel stages, industry. I also have accounts on here, so you can even start to think about organizing content for your account-based marketing. But that's kind of a whole rabbit hole, so I'll probably save that for another webinar, but it's, again, something to keep in mind as you're auditing your content. So again, here, after we did that audit of our experience, we found some low-hanging fruit. So we had a lot of content that was targeting our segments of Marketo users, Pardot users, different marketing automation streams. So you can see we built out this stream here. So if you go to our menu, you can see Marketo. So it's very obvious where we would want you to go if you're visiting our hub as a Marketo user. And from there, you can see the stream that we put together. So everything on this page is for a Marketo user. It's basically for our demand gen persona. So people in my role who are using Marketo, just like me, and kind of all the assets that would be interesting to them. And one part of the content audit that I really want to mention here is including a CTA. So it's so amazing how much content out there, especially in the B2B space, just doesn't have any CTA. I read good blog posts all the time that don't have any follow-up, or there's no next step. So as you're going through that content audit, that's another step that you could take, is making sure that every content piece you publish has a clear CTA. And it doesn't always have to be a huge gated asset that has that CTA on it. It could be a blog post. You might not want to gate everything you do, but there should always be that CTA, a call to action of what should they do next? What should they read next? Watch next, depending on the type of content that they're watching. And it's the perfect time to capture that data on your audience as they're engaged. So if someone's reading your webinar, reading your blog post, watching your webinars, that's the time to put a form in front of them and see if they're interested, capture that data, and then hopefully bring it into your clean database and start the funnel all over again. And that's pretty much it for me. So Jamie, do you want to go through a couple of your key takeaways?
Absolutely. So I would say basically, one of the things that I ended with was really understanding about compliancy and how your database will be affected on different data privacy laws, whether it be GDPR, whether it's CASL, or I'm sure we're probably more familiar with, CASL and some of the German laws that are in effect. So making sure that you're on top of that is definitely going to be key as we push through to Q2 in 2018. And then really it's just before you send another email, just make sure that all email addresses are working and functioning and they're at that low risk level, or that just make sure, please, for me, that there's no high risk emails in there. I think you'll definitely see some better results with your deliverability, with your open rates, and obviously if you take all that information and fill in the white space, being able to enrich the contact data, that's been extremely successful for us and my team, and I imagine that anyone else, all of our customers would feel the same when they do their segments.
Great. Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like people think about verifying data for things like direct mail because it costs a lot of money to send something, but email deliverability is just as important in a lot of cases. So just a couple of key takeaways from my end. I mentioned this quickly at the end, but before you create any other content, make sure your existing content has a CTA. If you're in B2B and lead gen is a priority for you, that's one way that you're missing out on leads if you don't have that CTA in place. So definitely stay on top of that every time you publish a post. And finally, try to organize your content in a way that's easily digestible and discoverable for your prospects and customers, and also your internal stakeholders like your sales team. They can be a really kind of a hidden gem in getting your content read by your prospects if it's coming directly from a sales rep versus from your automated Marketo emails. And we do have a couple questions. Feel free to keep submitting them in the question box below. We'll just move into that. Jamie, you kind of covered this one just now, but how can you tell what % of your database is compliant with GDPR? This all applies to CASL as well, but what can you do to protect yourself and check what your compliance is like?
That's a great question. So I'll give kind of a two-part answer, because there's the answer that I can give for anyone who depends on. So with our DHA, so I know internally for us, I can look through there and I have a field that shows when I run a contact or company append, and there's a literally distinct field that shows CASL versus GDPR, the regions, and the percentage of your database that falls under those. And then obviously there's another Excel sheet that kind of comes out and tells you the people. So if you're not a customer of ours, or you're not using a function like that, I mean, there's just plain, pivot tables in Excel, which doesn't really sound that fun, but that's one way to do it. I think it's better to know than not know, is all I can say moving forward with that one.
That's a good point. So this question sounds like it's more for me, but Jamie, feel free to weigh in. How can I get my internal teams to use and share my marketing content? So I kind of just mentioned this quickly, but really it's about making sure they know where to go. A lot of the time I'll see sales reps just going to Google and typing like product one pager or latest webinars and trying to find your latest content. So if your own team can't find it, there's a good chance your prospects can't. So I would definitely recommend not only meeting with your team and seeing how they prefer to find your content, which can be really revealing and great to do in person, but also just kind of looking over their shoulder when they're looking for something and seeing what habits they naturally have and how they're looking for things can be pretty helpful too.
Yeah, and I can weigh in a little bit on that question from, my own experiences here at Synthio. Is I would definitely recommend, it's not easy, you really do need a content hub externally, internally. And I know here on our team, we whenever we create some premium content, I know we have routine cadences in which we send it out to the company, but it's definitely been a challenge in finding where can we have all of that content live so people aren't going to our website and have employees and sales reps or anyone filling out forms. We don't need that. But somewhere that it can live outside of our website, that's an internal. So, I mean, there's different like intranets that you could use, or I think we did a little test pilot on hosting all of our content within a Salesforce application. I don't think that went all that great. So we're definitely challenged here for ourselves to being able to find that place. But you're right. If your sales team can't find it, then no one else can find it. So it's definitely something that we're top of mind here trying to find a solution for.
I bet just thinking of all those test form fields just blows your mind.
Every time I see one, I'm like, thank you. No.
One more question for you, Jamie. These two are actually kind of similar, so I'll just mix them together. Okay. So first of all, how often would you recommend a marketing team cleanse and audit their marketing automation? And then kind of side to that is, how can I keep my database clean long term?
Okay, no, those are all great questions. And so it really is going to depend on the size of your data. Well, not really just the size of your database. It's really how lean is your team. So a year and a half ago, we had a pretty lean team here. So we would do it, like I think I was saying earlier, we would do it about every 90 days. So bare minimum, I highly, highly recommend that you do it at least quarterly. That way you're at least coming up with a routine process, make sure there's someone that is kind of owns that project and that task. To do it. Because if there's some ownership to that and they can be held accountable, it'll make sure it's happened. It's just having someone own it is probably the number one thing. And I would say every 90 days. And if you're really, really, really doing well, I would say every 30 days. Although it seems like a lot, it's definitely worth it in the end because we need to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward. And then as far as, what was that second part of the question, Tara?
The second part was, how can I keep my database clean long term?
Long term. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with what I just said. And I think a long term, if you don't have an integration with a third party data vendor that can kind of just have it be an always on thing. I mean, for us, we have an integration. So it's literally happening every time we get a form fill, it appends the information right was inside our Marketo instance. But if you don't have that, then I would recommend just, again, having that key person and having it being tied to their KPIs. As silly as that sounds, it could be something like the cleanliness of your database should be tied to how much you are affecting revenue or not.
No, I love it. Having a goal usually gets things done. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Just one last question. So the last question is, how can I get started with persona research? So at Uberflip, this is something that's really led by our product marketer. But like I mentioned before around content, I think for anything regarding your personas, it's super important to bring in your customer-facing teams. So we actually had our product marketer get on calls with customers, find out what blogs are they reading, what events do they go to. And obviously that helps us on the marketing side, but it can help our sales team as well. And just learning what personas they connect with throughout the buying cycle is really important too. So we have a couple of personas that don't really come up in the conversation until, say, procurement or right until that contract is in front of them. So we need content for those people, but probably not at the top of the funnel. So that's kind of another thing that we wouldn't have been able to find out as a marketing team alone in a silo. Anything to add to that, Jamie?
No, I mean, I just feel like the timeliness of that question is so funny because I was just having a conversation earlier internally here about the necessity of really making sure that your product marketing team is part of really working with, like for us, it's our technology team and really making sure that everyone's kind of on the same page there because really depending on your persona, like we do have a very technical persona that you're right. The content that they read is very different than some of our other personas will read, and it does come later. It's not top of the funnel stuff. It comes more mid to the end. So I can definitely vouch for that being the case in our house here as well.
Awesome. Well, it looks like that's all the questions. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in today. Jamie, it was great to do this with you. Hopefully we'll do something again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. And yeah, thanks, Tara.
Great. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thanks.